Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So lumber, let's do the lumber update video. Now, I really don't have that much new information for you other than like there has been some mill curtailments due to the bad weather, and I guess people just probably just not able to show up for work. Anyway, other than that, there really hasn't been much change in the news. Everything is in short supply. The lead times on delivery are pushed out almost anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, and the prices keep ticking up. Now, in the futures market, we did see a bit of a slowdown in the rise of lumber. We're still up in the high, or up in the over the 1,000 per thousand mark, which is like insanely high. Now, to kind of give you a comparison, when it hit 650 per thousand, everybody thought that was just amazingly high. And we're at 1,000 per thousand now. Now, what that refers to is 1,000 board feet of 2x4 standard and better green lumber. And there has been a lot go on in the lumber industry over the last couple of years. It's really been a pretty good little niche for my channel to be in, because there's not a lot of people who talk as regularly about lumber as I do, at least from the futures standpoint, and then how that relates into the building industry and as far as retail prices go. I really have my fingers on the pulse of the industry. And if we go back and we look, I mean, there is a lot that goes into what's going on right now with lumber prices. And I have a few articles that I'm going to share with you guys down in the description. But I keep hearing like a lot of people, they come up with like these singular excuses, like it was the wildfires, or, you know, it's the building industry itself, or it's, you know, foreign sales or something. I don't know. Everybody keeps coming up with like these different, like, you know, ideas on why the lumber prices are as high as they are. Now, I look back at what I have witnessed and what I've seen, and it doesn't exactly make a lot of sense to why the lumber prices are as high as they are, but it really gives a lot of reasonings to know why it is that they have achieved this level and most likely are going to be falling back, because really this is a very unusual high price. I mean, it's not realistic to be here. And one of the articles that I'm going to share down in there is an article that's talking about appraisals and how an appraisal came in for a house and the builder's like, yeah, well, I want $10,000 more than that because the cost of the materials have gone up so much. But the appraiser was going from the surrounding neighborhood, you know, and the houses there, and they're like, well, this is how much they sell for. And the buyer had to come up with an extra $10,000 in cash. And now that's not the first time I've heard of something like this happening. I've talked to a few I wouldn't necessarily say house flippers like the guys you see on TV, but they buy houses, remodel them, and sell them. So that's what they do. And sometimes they rent them out or whatever. But a few houses have gone through just because they don't want to buy the material at this price, and they don't want to buy a house and just sit on it. So a lot of deals are going through just because the home buyer doesn't want to do the material purchasing to remodel it. Does that kind of... So these things are starting to take place on account of the material being as high as they are. One of the other articles that I have down in there is from the Wall Street Journal. Now, this one really starts telling like a much bigger picture of what's going on in the lumber industry. Now, we thought about, like, you know, we talked about wildfires in the past, and we talked about a lot of stuff, but really the Wall Street Journal is nailed on a key component to what I feel is really taking place inside of the other side of these price increases. Now, it's a long story, so I'm trying to break it down as quickly as I can. A few years ago, up in Canada, there was an infestation of beetles that really started devastating the forest up there. The Canadian government had this, what they called stumpage fees. And this is what, like, the government tax. They dropped those stumpage fees to go into salvage mode to save these, you know, to basically get these dead trees out of the woods and into the, you know, and make profit off of them, at least use something with them instead of just leaving them up there to rot. So the stumpage fees had dropped during the salvage mode. A bunch of the mills up there were like pumping out a lot of lumber, some big time mills. And when the salvage mode was coming to an end, this is like, and prices had really elevated too. This is when it ran up to like $650. I mean, a lot of these mills were pumping out a lot of lumber at $650 per thousand. They were making a ton off of it. But the salvage mode had come to an end, and a lot of these mills were also dealing with the time at a tariff that the United States had put on them. So it really devastated these Canadian mills up there. Well, earlier, a few years earlier, a lot of these same Canadian mills were opening up mills down in the South. And now that was an interesting play, because I think about this for just a minute. These guys, they're smart. I mean, they know the industry better than anybody. They have projections. They look, decades out. I mean, their product, from the time you plant it till the time you harvest it is like, a generation away. So what happened up there is these mills had really cheap trees, essentially, on account of the stumpage fees being as low as they were. Prices spiked. They sold off a lot of it to the United States, but those guys kind of had to shut down because of everything kind of going haywire, and the tariffs and the bugs no longer being there, and the stumpage fees going back up. So you come back down here to the United States, and a lot of these Canadian lumber mills have opened up down there. Well, timber prices are really low. Like, here it is, you have 1,000 per 1,000 board foot prices, but the landowners, what they get for their trees is like the same thing that they were getting like over 12 years ago, or like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. It's like the lumber price or the timber prices, the trees, the land, that hasn't profited in this lumber run-up. Now, what I found interesting is that in this Wall Street, and I'll leave a link to the article. In that article, they talk about how a lot of these farmers had this projection in the future, like in 25 years we're going to be able to sell our lumber or our timber, there's going to be so much demand, we're going to have all this housing, there's going to be this huge demand for timber, right? And it's kind of the same thing that happened here in Oregon with the marijuana, where these farmers who, like I heard of a blueberry farmer doing this. He had this projection of what marijuana was going to yield him, and he goes and plants and upgrades his farm and grows all this weed just to find out that the whole market is flooded. Well, the timber industry is something very similar down south, where they're not getting the top dollar for these timber, for trees, and it's flooded market at a time when the mills are getting 1,000 per 1,000 per board foot. Interesting, isn't it? And now, one of the sad things I heard about there in that article was a poor guy who had not cut his trees back when everybody else was cutting theirs. He saved his, and they've gotten huge. And so he has these giant trees that typically most people would look at and go yeah, those are awesome saw logs. And the upgraded high-tech automated mills say, yeah, but those trees are a little too big. But they'll buy them for pulp, and they'll grind them up and sell them to the paper mills. Isn't this some strange times that's taking place here? So there's a lot of things that are going on as far as what's going on in these retail prices and why they're going so high. There is a limitation. I mean, I was reading another article that says that they want Biden to basically do something, to make these mills produce more. And it's what are you going to do? Put a gun to their head and say, here, produce more? And the mill's we're running at capacity. What can we do? I mean, what do you do? Kiln dried lumber, you have to build more kilns. It takes time, and there's only so much room. It's a bottleneck. Same thing with pressure treated. There's only so much room that you can put so much lumber in, and then it has to process. So unless you're willing to build more processing, more kilns, more, stuff like that, then you have to deal with the supply chain that comes. And that's what we're dealing with right now. I don't know what to expect coming into the summer. I know things are going to get really strange here coming into the building season. But I think about what's going on with those appraisals. The replacement cost of a house, if it is more than the value, then why would you build homes? And then if you don't build homes, there's going to be even more demand for it, and then, the price of houses will go up. And then eventually, I guess, the builder will start building again. But this is strange, and I just don't see it lasting if interest rates continue to rise, because that's ultimately what's holding this thing afloat in such a manner. And, with the forbearance extension, so I'm going to leave a link down in the description for that. There's forbearance extension another 6 months, so people will not be going into foreclosure on a regular basis like you would anticipate. So that's going to be held off. There's, I don't know, guys. I mean, I don't know what's going to take place here in the next few. There's a lot that could happen, especially with, like, I just can't get my head off the Treasury General account and all the cash that's coming into the system and the dropping of issuance of bonds. I'm going to do a video on that one, but to me, there's going to be some sort of play coming into the building season where they are going to try and hold back the irrational exuberance. And the only way to do that is to let the interest rates continue to tick up. I don't know what's going to happen with lumber. This is not sustainable. Obviously, if you build a house and the cost of building the house is more than what it's worth, then there's no point in building a house. Prices have to come down. And they will at some point. But the way they're going and the demand, I don't know when that's going to happen, because it seems that it's only growing and the supply chain is getting tighter and the prices are only going up. Right now we have a half-inch CDX selling for $47 a sheet. That would typically sell for $18 to $22. At $47 a sheet, I cannot believe anybody would even buy it. And I have a feeling by the end of next week, it's probably going to be closer to $50. Okay, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.